Hello and welcome back to the third round. Christmas is approaching, your old train set has found its way out of the attic, or perhaps you just bought the old model of your dreams in perfect condition. Whatever the scenario, you are very likely to find your model refuses to move once on the track. It is seized. In 99% of cases, this can be fixed easily with very basic tools. So in this video, we are going to have a look at the most likely cause of such issues, how to fix them, as well as a few things to prevent them. So don't pack the train set away or send your dream model back before you watch this little helper video. First of all, what am I talking about? To illustrate the issue, I have assembled a small selection of models from the collection with various mobility issues. We have a BR03 out of the Märklin 3100 set, an E04 also out of the same set, and a BR111, it's a Märklin 3655, which is a digital logo. All these models are suffering from similar issues. Let's have a look at them. Let's start with the BR111. I'll put it on the track, give it a bit of power. It moves a few millimeters and stops. Then nothing happens. It is an early digital model, so the lights are not powered in analog mode. If I was using a digital controller, you would see that the lights are operational. Then we have an E04, which is analog. Here we have lights under power, and you can hear the reverser changing over. But the loco doesn't move, no motor noise whatsoever. Finally, we have the BR03 steamer. Whoops, nice save. So, a bit of power and the same thing happens. The reverser is making the right noises, the lights are operational, but there is no movement. So what are we dealing with here? In 99% of cases, these symptoms indicate a seized or sluggish mechanism, usually caused by hardened oil. Most oils used on models will degrade over time. They will start by thickening, then slowly but surely dry and harden over time. If models are not used regularly, the oil will settle and harden in places that will hinder the rotation of gears, shafts, axles, ultimately resulting in a seized mechanism. This is no different to what happens to other mechanical objects left unused, for example, old typewriters or sewing machines. So whether you buy an item that has been in storage or in a display cabinet for a long time, or new old stock items in their sealed original packaging, or simply get the forgotten train set out of the attic, it is a certainty that you will encounter this type of issues at some point. If you want to make sure you are indeed dealing with hardened oil, there is a very simple and safe test you can perform. Märklin locomotive axles, whatever the wheel arrangement, are engineered to allow for some lateral play, so that models can negotiate curves. They need to be lubricated, so the axle bearings are an ideal spot for oil to settle and dry. Here's an example of an healthy axle. I can wiggle it from side to side with no pressure whatsoever. The same applies to locomotives with valve gear or coupling rods, like here for example. If axles are not moving freely, then the problem is hardened or resinified oil, and this is what needs to be addressed before attending to anything else. So how do we do this? Let's start with what not to do. Do not try and turn the wheels manually using force to free the axles. Märklin wheels are press-fitted onto their axle. Too much pressure and you will damage the wheel bearing and end up with loose wheels. You would be surprised at how easily this can happen. On electric or diesel locomotives, this might not be the end of the world. Steam locomotives are another story. We can see an example with this chassis, where too much force was used and some of the wheels were loosened, and can now turn around their axle. You can try and realign everything and use some fast-set glue to reattach the wheel, but in my experience this is very fiddly and I was never able to achieve a good durable result. So I found it best to avoid finding myself in this situation if at all possible. There are numerous ways of dealing with seized mechanisms, for example using ultrasonic cleaners, but you can achieve the desired results using readily available tools and no additional investment. This happens to be my preferred method and is what I'm going to cover in this video. So let's get the tools ready. We need a cloth to avoid damaging paint or applied details when handling the model. Then the usual Märklin toolset, or anything comparable if you prefer more fancy tools. I never found the need to progress from the toolset because it contains the tools I am the most likely to need in a small package that is easy to keep within reach. But I'll use my favorite pair of bent tweezers instead of the ones included with the toolset. Then we need cotton buds. Surprise, surprise. Then some penetrating fluid. I use WD-40. We'll be working on painted wheels and surfaces, so make sure that whatever you use is solvent-free. Isopropyl alcohol, for example, is not the thing to use for this task. You can decant some fluid in a syringe for a more precise application and less mess, but that's optional. Then we'll need model railway oil, so the Märklin brand or anything else suitable. I use Ballistol, for example. That's it. Time to take care of our victims, starting with the BR111, because it's the simplest scenario. We'll turn it around and check the axles. They can move, but very sluggishly, so we are indeed dealing with hardened oil. And since it is the case with the axles, it is extremely likely that the other gears in the mechanism will need attention too. So I need to get into the loco. I'll remove the body, then I'll remove the fake bogie and its clamp. If we look at the state of the screw and the screw hole for the clamp, we can see a little accumulation of raising there. So we are on the right track. I'll open the motor, take the armature out, and we are ready for the penetrating fluid. I'll use the syringe here and I'll apply the fluid to the axles and all gears. It usually takes a few seconds to travel where it needs to go. Then I'll move the wheels by hand with a back and forth motion until they are completely free. After that, it is just a matter of wiping as much of the fluid off as possible with a cotton bud. Whatever remains there will dry off pretty quickly. I'll check the gears in the process and I remove any dried grease residues I come across in the process. Then I can put the motor back together and proceed with the usual servicing steps. I am assuming you are familiar with those, so I won't cover them. If not, there are plenty of maintenance videos in the Can I Fix It playlist with a little link at the top of the screen now. So it's time for a quick function test. Super! We have motion. I can now finish reassembling the model and we'll check it another time. Excellent! I'd say this one is fixed. Time for our next victim. We'll check the E04 now, which has a different type of mechanism. We'll follow the same process as before. We are going to start by checking the wheels. We try and wiggle the axles and none of them are moving. Everything is frozen solid. Hardened oil again. So we'll need to get inside as well and open the motor. I'll need to remove the armature, which is sticky too. So I push it out of its bearing with the tip of my tweezers. Okay, we are ready for the WD-40 one more time. I'm going to start by freeing the wheels, so I'll apply fluid to all gears and axles. Then I'll slowly push the axles back and forth until I manage to restore lateral movement. My wheels are free now, but I cannot turn them. I'll apply a bit more fluid between the gears in the motor housing. I'll wait a bit, then I'll try to move the wheels gently with the same result. So I'll use a little trick here. I reinsert the motor armature and we'll use it as well as the force of the demultiplication of the gearing to my advantage. A quarter turn of the armature with gentle pressure is enough to free the motor gears and get things moving. So I can take the armature back out and I can now move the wheels with a back and forth until I don't feel any more resistance. Then it is just a matter of wiping as much of the fluid off as possible with cotton buds again. In the process, I also remove any dried rests of oil I come across on the gears. Now I can put the motor back together for a quick test. And we have motion again. So, it's a good thing to check the leading wheels are free at this point too. This is often forgotten. Seized leading wheels will cause drag, and actually quite a lot of it, and conductivity issues on some models. So it's important to make sure they are free and clean. Then it is just a matter of finishing with the standard servicing steps and putting everything back together for a final test. Isn't that nice? Job done. Okay, on to the next victim. It's time for a steam locomotive now with its valve gear. Before doing anything else, I'll check the valve gear on both sides to make sure nothing looks out of place. The big giveaway sign here is if a coupling rod is not horizontal. So everything looks fine. I can't see any bent pins anywhere or anything, so we'll proceed. If it wasn't, this would be the point where I would pack a newly acquired model and send it back to the seller. So let's follow the same step all over again to try and get this thing going. Let's have a look at the axles. The first two axles are a bit sluggish, but they're free. The last one barely moves. So it's hardened oil again. Let's open this beauty. I'll take the motor apart, take the armature out, and now we are ready for the fluid. This time I'll use it straight out of the can, just to show the syringe is optional. So I'll place a bit of absorbent paper under the model to catch a bit of the mess, though. I'll start with a quick spray in the motor housing, and then I'll give each axle a quick squirt on both sides. You really don't need much. I'll work on freeing the axles first, and then I'll try to move the wheels gently. Then, as the wheels are not turning, I'll use the armature trick again to free the motor gears. Quarter turn, and we have motion. I'll wipe some of the fluid off already. Then I'll give the wheels a bit of back and forth until they are completely free. Then it is time to get everything as dry as possible with cotton buds or a cloth and remove any dried oil residues here and there. I also check the leading wheels, which are seized in this case. Here it is usually just a matter of using some pressure to free the axles with nothing else but fingers, or put the axles inside a cloth and use your finger to apply pressure. And then we can give it a bit of back and forth. You can use some fluid or a bit of oil to help here too. Then I can reassemble the chassis, and with that done we are ready for a quick function test. Look at that! Isn't this a nice change? So a bit of lubrication later, and with the body back on we are ready for a final test. Excellent! Another one bites the dust. I'd say all of this wasn't too hard, was it? Now that we have got everything operational, can we prevent any locking or seizing from happening again? You're fighting against the clock here. So as we have seen, a model's worst enemy is idleness. So the easiest and probably most enjoyable way to avoid seizing is to run models regularly. If you have a large collection, a few minutes twice a year should be enough. If you are unable to do this, then there are a few things you can do to prevent or at least delay the process. The first one is to avoid over-lubricating. A tiny drop of oil on the recommended lubrication points is all that is needed. Too much of it, or putting some oil in the wrong place, will only accelerate the process. Then you could try and switch to an oil that is more durable. The Märklin oil is fine for regular use, but it contains resins which solidify as the oil ages. Other oils don't have this property, such as ballistol, which is what I have been using for a few years now. Finally, if you know that you are not going to need a model for a very long time, then you could try to do a partial service. That's wiping gears clean, wiping wheels, clean the motor housing and armature, then pack the model away. Apply oil only when you get the model out later on. Right, that was quite a lot of information to digest, so I think it is time to end the video. I hope some of you found the information useful, and that some of your unused trains will find their way back on the track as a result. I'd like to thank you very much for watching. This is very much appreciated. So are all the subscriptions, likes and shares you have been kind enough to give me. I find them very rewarding, and they are the best way to help the channel in reaching a wider audience. Many thanks again for this, and bye for now.